What's up, fellow adventurers? Paysetter Ben Barsh, or Ben's Hair, whichever you like to call me. Back again today with another video, and I know it's been a long time, but we're finally back in action. And yes, the hair does look amazing. It's nice and freshly cut just for this video. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about how Frog God Games merges the old and the new school to make the best publishing as possible. Now, there are a couple different points that I want to make during this video, but I just want to warn you, they are all connected in one way or another, so just stick with me. It'll all sort of weave its way together in the end of the video. So if you are new here, Frog God Games is a publishing company that makes amazing game supplements for your tabletop games, mainly fantasy role-playing games like 5th edition Pathfinder, Swords and Wizardry, and similar kind of systems, you know, some Starfinder thrown in there and that kind of stuff. And to that point, I kind of want to go over the background a little bit of Frog God Games. And the main comment to that point is the designers, writers, owners of Frog God Games have a very, very strong old school background. So someone like Bill Webb, who is the CEO of Frog God Games, has been playing Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games, tabletop games in general, for nearly his entire life. If you want a little background on that, actually just go click on our last video that we made. I actually interviewed Bill on their latest project, Teagle Manor, but I'm gonna get into that in a minute here. So Bill and the other frogs grew up playing Dungeons & Dragons. Now I know a lot of designers say that they've played majority of the game systems, or that they try to play as many systems as possible to get the best designing features into their game, but these are people who genuinely love and loved the game growing up, obviously because they made a very successful publishing company out of it. That's kind of an obvious point, we know that, but the important thing there is that there's the old school background that they work into the new school publishing, if that makes sense. An example you were thinking of? I have two. And they all follow under the same umbrella of mega dungeons. Now, mega dungeons are basically mega dungeons. In a quick description of a mega dungeon, it's basically just an enormous dungeon that has its own storyline, living ecosystem, or atmosphere, all within this one dungeon. Now, this dungeon can be multiple layers down into the earth. It can be a huge castle that just seems to never be ending. But the main criticism that mega dungeons share, and have always shared, is that it lacks story. Now, this is sort of a criticism of the old school. Things like monster hotels or hack and slashes, or, you know, the monster ecology of the area doesn't quite make sense. And the thing that people talk about the most, in my opinion, whether they're just discussing it, criticizing it, praising it, is that new school D&D covers a lot about story. It's really story-based, and it's really party-driven to make sure that you and your character are in tune as possible, so it benefits the party in general. See, what Frog God Games has done is they've taken the old school idea of a mega dungeon, or just the story in general behind a dungeon or a specific monster, and they have given it a storyline. A strong storyline at that one can follow with their party and really give meaning behind the dungeon delve that they're going to be doing for possibly the next year. We see that in this big book called Rep in Athic. Now, Rep in Athic itself has 56 dungeon levels. 56. Just look how big this book is. Honestly, if this were a weapon in D&D, I would give it probably a D4 or D6. It's pretty strong. But what I really like about Rap in Athic is that it has the village of Zelkor's Ferry. And Zelkor's Ferry is sort of like a refuge for you during the entirety of your adventure. It can be your starting point, you can use it for refuge, or if your characters aren't strong enough, then they can retire there, as long as they haven't died yet. But in my opinion, something simple as adding a village in the beginning of the adventure to a mega dungeon that can give you quests, give you lore, to give you backstory, that all helps supplement the mega dungeon, and it really gives the characters a sense of purpose when heading into the adventure. Another way that Frog God Games uses old and new school elements is that the lethality of the adventures are still very much prominent. A big criticism of 5th edition or new school game systems in general is they sometimes say it feels a little bit too light mode, that it isn't as hard, or the characters are too powerful. Frog God recognizes this and still uses the old school elements of lethality, especially at low levels, to make sure that you really feel like you're playing D&D, revolutionized and made fit for the new school experience. My sort of second example of the umbrella of a mega dungeon is Teagle Manor, which is our most recent project that actually was successfully funded on Kickstarter. Thank you very much. I can't even speak. Thank you everyone so much for that. So Teagle Manor is something that was taken and revolutionized as an old school mega dungeon that was taken and blown up to a very, very vast proportion by Frog God Games. And in there they add detail about the Rump family, they add in the Temple of the Frog and the Teagle Village and all that kind of stuff. So basically what my point is, you take a mega dungeon, which is supposed to be this hack and slash idea, and revolutionize it and give it the fitting story that it deserves. And that's very much a new school element, is ideas are very story driven. If we look at the campaign books by Wizards of the Coast, they've done a great job of driving the story home as well as the competitive nature, especially seen in the Tomb of Annihilation. But the trend that was most notable, or the trend that has caused the most notable reaction from the community, is something like Critical Role, which is obviously extremely story driven. So I think that's why a lot of new players, or 5th edition, is sort of considered to be the story driven game system that people were craving. So going back to the overall encompassing point is that Frog God has done a good job of making their adventures story driven, but also giving them the old school feel of lethality, or just the dungeonous feel that people crave in Dungeons and Dragons. And in doing so, they bring back monsters like Orcus, who is very much I would argue more of an old school entity. We haven't heard much of Orcus recently in modern publishing, but Rappanathic has a lot to do with him. So if you're interested in demons and chaotic nature, then that book is definitely for you. Now, sort of the second point that I wanted to touch on was the game system Swords and Wizardry by Matt Finch. This is just another way that Frog God has taken the old school and made it anew. So Matt basically took Swords and Wizardry, and it's an old school OSR game system, but it has a lot of new school feels to it as well. There's still a lot of people playing it, so you don't feel like you're kind of alone playing, one of the box sets or something. It's not hard to find players for this. There's a light version of it, sort of like the basic rule set for much easier. You can learn the game much easier. You can take it to schools and teach kids that. I know we do that a lot. But also little game mechanics like the ascending and descending AC that is incorporated into the book really makes you feel like you're playing a revolutionized game system. And the coolest part about that actually is a lot of the frogs run Swords and Wizardry games at conventions. I know Matt Finch and Bill Webb usually run a Swords and Wizardry, one or more games during the convention. And being able to play with Matt Finch, or play Swords and Wizardry rather, is a lot similar to playing, like the Brown Box with Gary Gygax. It's like his little baby that he's created. He knows the ins and outs and knows how to make the most fun of it. So that goes into my last point here that I want to talk about, is convention presence. Frog God has an amazing convention presence. If you want to go ahead and follow the Frog God Facebook, that's the best place to keep up to date with everything that we do with conventions. Little sneak peek, I'm going to be vlogging at GaryCon, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that. But convention presence is something that's really, I feel like it's not a point that people really hit on as much as they should. If we look to the old school TSR, back when Gen Con was sort of just first coming about, they had the TSR Castle, and it was always so hype, and they had new releases every time they went out to a convention. And then D&D sort of faltered over time and kind of took a downhill slope with convention presence. Yes, you can argue that Wizards of the Coast has convention presence because of Adventurers League is at almost every notable new school con. But Frog God still has a huge booth. It has a ton of products on sale. Usually there's new releases at the booth every time we go to these conventions. So it really feels like they're taking that old school idea of making sure to be able to be at these conventions for their fans, players, and community, and doing it in obviously the new school conventions. Like Gamehole Con is the perfect example of a convention that's growing like crazy, and Frog God growing with it. One thing I will say and give a quick plug to is the Tome of Adventure design. If you're struggling with making a design for your campaign, or you just don't have the time to sit at home and think up every little detail of your campaign, this book is really good, and it has a lot of the Frog God themes to it as well that encompass that old and new school. So this is a really good book for you if you're looking for help while making your campaign, or perhaps you're a writer and you're just looking for good tips from a company or from people in general. This book is a highly prized one out of the lot that are made to make your life easier as a game designer or a dungeon master. Of course, the link is in the top of the description to that. I'll link directly to this book in general, but you can also go to the website and shop around. You can see Rappanathic on there. You can also see a lot of other 5th edition and Swords and Wizardry books that I have mentioned or talked about during this video. If Pathfinder is your cup of tea, then there's some stuff on there as well. I know that definitely counts as a new school game system. And in this video, I didn't really even cover the fact that Frog God was a massive creator for Pathfinder, and now we're moving into the massive space of 5th edition. So obviously Frog God is doing something right in their ability to merge the old and the new school, because they do have a lot of old and new school fans, as we see through all this huge, absolutely massive convention presence. And I won't even get into how they produce these absolutely massive books, and then everything is detailed so well in color. All of it's in color. Like, this is not really heard of in the third-party publishing community, and these maps are just absolutely beautiful. The Teagle Manor maps, I'll just drop in the little slideshow of pictures right now. Alyssa Faden is working on them, and they are just unbelievably detailed. I mean, it's really hard to rival the quality that Frog God is putting out. So if you're an old school fan of D&D that wants to get into the new school, or you are a new school fan who is looking for something that is new, fresh, and exciting from a publisher, then Frog Games is definitely the company for you. So the question that I want to pass off to all of you is, what game system do you play and why? Throw those ideas down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what systems you guys play, and if you play Frog God games. That is going to be all for me today. That is how Frog God merges the old and the new school to make a revolutionized publishing scenario? Publishing beast. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video at any point or learned something new about Frog God Games, as well as leave those comments down below and subscribe for more content. There is going to be way more content coming to the Frog God Games channel. Me talking about Frog God Games, me talking about aspects of Dungeons & Dragons, or just interviewing people that are really cool and way more popular than I am. So anyways, everyone, keep those rolls and spirits high, and we'll see you next time.